Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We're going to talk about mostly today an absolute doozy of a game between
Yeah.
LSU and Arkansas Wednesday night here in Omaha. I think folks now have only just caught their breath from that game, so this will be this will be a little bit of a come down off of that. Mark and I will talk you through it. If you're an Arkansas fan listening, first of all, thank you for listening. I don't know that I would have the
hmm
emotional capacity to listen to a podcast like this after a game like that. But if you're here with us, we appreciate you. We'll help to talk you through it a little bit. Before we get to anything specific, though, let me remind you that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover this season is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. The sun's out and the fun is on at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Score a cool pool, savor summer flavor with a grill, prep for fishing weekends, or mount up with a new mountain bike. However you have fun, you can't lose with our top brands. Gear up online at academy.com or at your local store. Okay, Mark, I think the best way to sum up what we saw last night was I was in the elevator riding back up the hotel, and there was an older woman, an LSU fan. She and I don't know what relationship they were to this other woman, a friend or a sister. I don't know. But she looked at the other, and she said, I didn't think I was going to make it. I thought they were going to have to defibrillate me. And I thought that summed it up exactly right. I think both sides uh,
hmm
of this one were feeling similarly, and even in the press box among us folks who don't really have a dog in the hunt. I mean, if
hmm
you didn't feel a little bit nervous during that game, I don't know that you have a pulse. So
Yeah.
um, just a wild deal. We'll discuss some of the details. We'll walk you through it. But Mark, just give me a sense for what your kind of just um, emotional feeling was, like
Yeah.
your just human level feeling was as you watched that game come down to the business end.
Well, certainly as the ninth inning was just a classic in both directions. People made plays. People had plays made to them. It was just kind of a very, very memorable. And it's one of those games that you're going to think back on and think about a play here, a play there, and how it would potentially change the outcome. And that and as I was watching it, that's the piece that I kept thinking about. All right, is this going to be the play? And then another one would happen. And this is going to be the one that we're talking about. And they just kept going. And I think obviously that's what brings us in and is the allure of championship sporting events. But then the other side of it was just the human part of it. You had a guy like Jared Jones who really was in a terrible slump and has uh, figured it out, or however you want to call that, and then had some just redeeming moments, right? That really that now that's his lasting legacy heading into the finals anyway. Um, and then on the Arkansas side, you just unlike 2018, I guess it was with the misplayed pop up. That was kind of the one moment that everyone's going to think about. This was just a collection of them, and they all just seem to fall just dominoes, all together. And that's the piece that when you think about, we all want to focus on, oh, this one play here, this one play there, that cost us the game, right? It's human nature to do that, and that wasn't the case here. If several different plays go a different way, an inch here, uh, an outfielder doesn't slip, or a different decision is made on a ground ball. All of these different things, if they go a different way, um, maybe Arkansas is playing tonight, and I think that's the hard part. If you're looking at it from an Arkansas fan's perspective, you had all these opportunities to and it's seemingly none of them went your way. Obviously, there are other plays in the game that did go their way, but during that stretch, it was just one, two, three, four. It just kept going, and that's the part. If you're LSU, you think, okay, we're living right. We made some breaks, but we also received some. And if you're Arkansas, it's like, oh man, we had this great team, all this talent, had this opportunity, and then is just not meant to be. And that's really, it's got to be hard to to grasp your arms around and make any sense of how this thing transpired, especially, just that the bottom of the ninth walk-off piece is just, it was a gut punch, and you feel for those players who were involved in it. You feel for the fan base that's been so close to it. You feel for Dave Van Horn, who's been so close so many times, and this was certainly one of his best teams, and it's just, that's that's baseball, right? The best team doesn't always win, and certainly LSU's got a great team too, as does Coastal, which we'll talk about soon. But that to me was that'll be my lasting thought, is just all of those dominoes that just seem to knock Arkansas out of the picture.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the specifics here. I
Yeah.
mean, the frankly, the top of the ninth was
Mm-hmm.
as interesting as the bottom in a lot of ways, where LSU or Arkansas got some breaks on behalf, from LSU. Ball just kind of skitters away on a potential, a ball that, really didn't get that far away
Mm-hmm.
from Jared Jones. Like that play happens. Then there's a 2-run single, Justin Thomas. I'm trying to get the order of operations right there. But the point is, like, this wasn't a situation where Arkansas was controlling the game all the way through, and then just we got to the end, and then they just couldn't close the deal. They
Right.
had to do their own fighting here, and LSU handed them some things. I guess the Jones play I'm talking about is in the 8th inning. That ties it up. They take the lead in the 9th inning on the Thomas single off of Myers, and then all that work, and you get a lead, and then you go to the 9th, and so here are the key plays, and then we'll talk about them, either individually or as a group. So it feels like kind of the original sin, if you will, and I hate to put them that way because these are all guys just trying their best, right? Um, Reese Robinette chases a ball in the hole that wasn't
Mm-hmm.
his ball, and that's a mistake made out of just trying to do too much. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he wants to make that play for his team, and I get it, and so he gets there, but now he's darn near halfway to second base by the time he
Mm-hmm.
corrals it. And then that's a hard throw. Like, he's spinning and throwing to try to get it to the pitcher covering. And as often happens there, the throw is just behind the pitcher. So you get the extra base there. Later in that inning, then you have the play that I feel like has gotten the most discussion. And in the moment, it's interesting when you're watching a game in person, or, in our case, in a press box versus watching on TV, because
Yeah.
I think the Aloy play in the press box wasn't the one that folks, because you're talking to your neighbors and your people around you,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the one that really got the most attention. But on TV, the reaction by, Chris Burke and Kyle Peterson talking about it, I think is what sparked some of that. And that's
Yeah.
not a criticism. I mean that to say, like, obviously Chris Burke knows about middle infield play. And so the folks watching at home got to hear him break that down in a way that we did not. And so I didn't
Yeah.
think a ton of it when Aloy moves to his right, catches that ground ball, goes to third. Now, I didn't see that play coming, but when he made it, I was like, okay, make sure you get an out. He took an out. So at least in that moment, it didn't necessarily trigger like, oh, what was he doing? It was kind of like, okay, I don't know that I would have made that choice, but
Mm-hmm.
here we are. And I think some of it is just because it's like, okay, you finish this inning the way you think you should. That's not going to matter, right? You got an out, but then you start to watch the replays, and you hear folks like Chris Burke talk about it, and then you realize, like, he is fielding the ball, and Milam is what, like, 4 steps out of the
Yeah.
batter's box,
Just leaving the box. Yeah.
right? And so, in hindsight, looks like that. You got to make the play, obviously, but it looks like that's a relatively routine double play. And then suddenly, and then that's when that just, for me, that's when I started to really realize, like, oh no, like, that actually
Mm-hmm.
was a bit of a mental error there. And then of course there's a liner next that ricochets off Charles Davalon. This is one where actually the advantage was to us in the stadium, because you could see in real time. I think what creates this situation for him is he breaks the wrong way. Now it's a line drive right at him, and that's a hard play, but he kind of takes a step or two back. So then as he's trying to recover, I think he gets caught
He
in
stumbled.
between.
Yeah.
And like, am I going to let this bounce? Am I going to lay out for it? And then he ends up stumbling and tripping over his feet or slipping or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates that play. And then of course I don't think there's much to criticize here, but they Arkansas, this just makes it even more heartbreaking. Arkansas had Cam Kojo played in the exact right spot
Mm-hmm.
on that Jared Jones line drive, and it was just a little too tall.
Yep.
And he timed the jump right. I don't think it was that, like, it was just too tall, and that ends up being the hit that does it. But again, it just makes it that much more heartbreaking. And for me, the lasting image, and even in the, if you've read the quotes in the post game, like, clearly Charles Davalon really wore this heavily.
Mm-hmm.
Both Dave Van Horn and Ryder Helfrich in the post game talked about how much he was apologizing for misplaying that. And to their credit, Dave and Ryder were both like, look, we're not here without him. Like, he has nothing to
Mm-hmm.
apologize for. That's just kind of a baseball play that just
Yeah.
didn't go your way. And so anyway, that to me, that's the image, because also you saw a lot of video of clearly emotional Charles Davalon feeling like he lost that game for his team. Of course, that's not the reality, but you can understand how, as a
Yeah.
young man, I think you and I both would probably feel that way if we were in
Yeah.
his shoes. And so it's hard, but man, just to your point you made earlier, it was just one thing after another. And if any one of those things goes differently,
Yeah.
it's a different game, like, and that's for Arkansas. Like, it wasn't just one drop pop up against Oregon State and the next guy beat you. This was just like a one by one unraveling of this game that felt in hand. And there was one out in the inning before any of it started, which is another amazing thing. Like, this didn't start from the jump. So I don't know where you want to take it from there, Mark, but I guess my biggest takeaway is that it is interesting just how much that Aloy play in particular ends up feeling like the biggest story of all of that stuff. But
Yeah.
it was funny that, because we're not hearing the broadcast, that we didn't necessarily think of it that way in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I was surprised when the ball was hit. I was thinking the game's over. I was thinking that's a double play. And he did move away from second base to make the catch, and his momentum was going to third. But you see this play all the time. If there's no runner on second, there's only a runner on first, and he makes the turn. I I do think there was time to complete the double play, and I think that's it's just like you said, is just that's just kind of one moment that's getting a lot of attention. But and then I think the other part of this is, you have to give LSU credit for putting the ball in play, for forcing, or in a clutch moment, everybody's all keyed up trying to make the play on the greatest stage, uh, not going up there and taking strike three, or not going up there and just taking bad ABs. Right? We've all seen it because they're feeling the pressure too, and they were able to execute, at least to the extent that they were able to win the game. It was a roller coaster kind of game anyway, because you did have some lead changes and you had some momentum swings, but the ninth inning was just bad shit, man. It was nuts, and all of those emotions just came pouring out, and baseball is a sport where you've got to keep your emotions in check. A lot of times with football, you might want to be a little keyed up. You might want to be able to run through that guy. In baseball, that typically works against you, and to be able to harness it is, I mean, credit to what LSU was able to do. And they made mistakes of their own, but they were able to at least execute within that pressure to make these things happen. So a lot of focus on Arkansas's mistakes, and yeah, I get it, but it takes two, right? And I do think that's been kind of overlooked a little bit, that LSU was able to do their own execution during this pressure and force some of this stuff to happen.
Yeah, and then there's just the the whole Arkansas of it all, where
Yeah,
by the time you're listening to this, I will either have up or will soon have up a column just on the working title of which we'll see if this actually ends up being the headline. But you know, jinxes aren't real, but Arkansas and Omaha provides compelling evidence.
yeah,
Like because it's just and I've always said like, look, and this is true of Florida State too. Unless there's something about that coaching staff that you think is causing the team to have these moments, then I don't see how you could necessarily like. I just think that's baseball, and I just have a hard time believing that there's something about Dave Van Horn and his staff that is contributing to this, right? Like I'm not sure what they're supposed to do when a guy slips and falls and a ball ricochets off his
yeah,
body. Like I
right.
just, and so it's one, and it's also one thing if it's a coaching staff that coaches tight. Like there are, we won't name names necessarily, but there are coaching staffs you just hear about like, hey, that coaching staff coaches tight and their teams can feel it. I don't hear that about Arkansas. And I didn't hear it about Florida State back in the Mike Martin days, to be honest. Now, do maybe those players feel a little bit of pressure because they understand the history? That I could buy.
Hmm.
Um, and so I guess it is a coaching challenge to help them play freer. But I just think that that's human nature. Like you understand the history there. Like those players aren't ignorant to that, and so I think, and relatedly, I think that's why someone like Charles Davalon feels so strongly about it, is he does understand that. Oh my God, this happened again.
Hmm.
And we we were going to be the team that was going to end that, and so to feel that weight has to be just crushing in a way. So I do think there is something to it, just because I think there's that history builds on itself, that scar tissue continues to build. But at the same time, I do think there is a lot of an element of when you get to this elite level of college baseball, like these things just kind of happen, and we glom on to Florida State and Arkansas, but we focus on those programs because to some degree they are prisoners of their own success. We don't
Yeah,
talk a similar way about Louisville, but
right.
Louisville's been here 6 times and they've never been particularly close to winning a national title,
Yeah,
right? But we talk about Florida State and Arkansas because we believe those teams could have and maybe should have won national titles. So in a way, it's like a compliment to how consistent they are and the teams they build, because history is littered with teams that have made 4, 5, 6, whatever trips to Omaha and just don't sniff national titles.
yeah,
Um, anyway, it again. I'm just kind of finishing my thought and then just tossing it to you,
yeah,
but but
yeah,
I'm curious your thoughts.
yeah. If Texas were here, they won the SEC this year. We'll pick on them. If they were in the Arkansas role, okay, and they had lost in this, really frustrating, demoralizing way that Arkansas did, it would be a different narrative just because there's not all that history of Arkansas getting to this right to the precipice of greatness and just not being able to take that final nudge over the finish line. And granted, they would still have to win tonight, right? So this wasn't a one and done kind of moment.
Right.
However, once you get this close, you always think about what might have been, and that's going to eat at Arkansas all year. I mean, it's when you're that close, that's the great thing. You want these opportunities where you continue to get close and close and close, because eventually it's going to break your way. It's just when it breaks the other way consistently, it's just so hard to reconcile. It really is. So I think the other part of this is that Arkansas did not have postseason success the last few years at home, and they were able to kick that monkey off their back, right? And threw it. So they rolled through, very impressive. Um, Even knocked off the reigning national champs on the way. A very talented team that certainly could was an Omaha caliber club. So I do feel like Arkansas is. This was a positive year, even though right now nobody wants to hear that, right? So, but yeah, that's kind of where I am on that.
Yeah, and on the LSU side of it, feels like we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little more about the LSU piece of this and their path in general.
Yeah,
We talked before he went on the air, just that it's just the reality of it that especially when LSU beat Arkansas earlier in the series on whatever that was Saturday night, that it kind of felt like, okay, no disrespect to you know to UCLA or Murray State in this deal, where those two teams are going to see each other again, and it kind of boils down to a 3-game series between the two, and LSU is just the better team, as they were all season, as it turns out. I picked Arkansas yesterday. I picked Arkansas to win the national title. I've been on Arkansas all year as this is the best team in the SEC, and yet LSU won 4 of the 5 between the two. Now the
yeah,
3-game series in the regular season was in Baton Rouge, so there's that. But 4 out of 5 is very telling, and so I think it's a lot of credit deserved for a team that I think it's based on the line of questioning I get on my various Louisiana radio stations. Like there has
yeah.
been plenty of anxiety about various things this year. The offense away from Alec Box, the bullpen, which I think
Hmm.
is still going to be a concern as you go into the
Yeah,
Coastal Series. If for some reason Anderson or Ianson doesn't give you what you're looking for against Coastal, so it's not as if this team is just like undeniable, and this is not the 23 team, and this is not last year's Tennessee
right.
in terms of the roster construction. Like there were legitimate questions about this team even going into Omaha, and it just continues to fight through them and make it work. And furthermore, I do think it's what we saw last night is kind of what they talk about when they say sometimes the name on the front of the jersey matters. And
Yeah.
closing out the Yankees in the World Series is different than closing out the Diamondbacks, right?
Hmm.
And I think closing out LSU is different than closing out anybody else in Omaha, and especially with this particular where the program's at right now. There's just so much kind of like positive mojo there. There's just something different about those last 3 outs, and so. But impressive stuff for LSU to beat this Arkansas team 4 out of 5 times during the season. There's just nothing left to prove about it. They were just on balance the better team this season, which I didn't have. I was wrong about, and that's how it goes. But
Yeah,
man, super impressive run for them to get this done in 3 games instead of the pitching moving forward. Just super impressive.
yeah. We all had questions on after. Okay, so what happens in the games that Anderson and Ianson don't pitch? And then you had a scenario where rain limited Ianson to 3 innings. So for LSU to be able to roll through this, knock off Arkansas twice, and and yeah, Anderson was a big part of that, but Ianson really, I mean, he gave you 3 good innings, but that was really it, right? And for other guys like Zach Cowan was great. He started in a regional and didn't go well. He was able to really put that away, and that changeup was back to the way it was when he was so effective for really the first what 2/3 of the year, and so he was great. Chase Shores gave him something, and he's certainly we all love the velo, but his pitchability hasn't been what he'd like it to be, I'm sure. But he was able to give him some good innings, and of course Kason Evans the other day was really good, and when he had to come in for Ianson. So that's the piece that if you're LSU looking forward, um, you're makes you feel, I guess, a little emboldened because you aren't just reliant on those two guys. You do have some others who can come in and give you some legitimate hope that, hey, these guys can put zeros up. And I'm not sure I felt that way heading into it. Certainly Evans had his moments, but also, he also had moments where he just maybe inconsistent would be the word. But there's no denying the talent. He's going to be a star. It's just how ready is he? And boy, he looked ready the other day. So, and then if Cowan can continue, I mean, he pitched on Wednesday. I mean, he could certainly come back on Monday and give you something if it goes to a third game. So, I think that's going to be fascinating. And the other part of this is what order does LSU stack their pitching in? It's quote Ianson's turn. He's only thrown what 40 something pitches, but Anderson should be back and ready to go. And I think I like, setting the tone with him, making sure you give you the best opportunity to win game one. He's been your quote Friday guy all year. I would assume that's what Jay will do, but Jay's going to be cagey with it. We won't know until the last possible moment. So I do think that's kind of a fun thing for people like us to talk about. What would you do? How would you stack it up? But I would go Anderson and then Irons and then do you use Evans to win a game and try to and not have to worry about Monday? And I think I would. All right, if it's tied in the seventh or eighth, then you need to go to somebody. I think that's the play I would make, and maybe you don't burn him, and maybe he can give you something, in a game three if it comes to that. But yeah, I love that kind of strategy, and facing a Coastal team that can't lose, and they just continue to impress. And it, I think the thing with Coastal that really strikes me is I hadn't watched them a whole lot, before the postseason, but when you watch them, there's not like this one thing that really strikes you. It's just the overall body of work. They're good at everything. They don't make a lot of mistakes. Everybody makes some, but they really minimize them and don't seem to make them in crucial moments. They just seem to be really consistent, really level, and I've said this many times, but in baseball, consistency is a superpower, man. If you can do the same thing over and over again and not have all these volatile swings, you can be successful. And that's what, for whatever reason, they've been able to do it with 18 to 20, 23 year olds and be able to be the same team game after game. And that's how you get on these runs because you're not making the critical mistakes, and you're not going into slumps, and you're not doing all those things that get you beat. And that's going to be what LSU's got to deal with, because LSU's going to have to continue to put pressure on Coastal, but at the same time Coastal, they're good enough defensively. They're they're certainly good enough on the mound to limit those opportunities, and LSU's going to have to be able to come through with those in the limited opportunities, come through with and bunch their hit, so to speak, kind of, get the hit with when they do get a runner. And I think that's going to be one of the fascinating pieces of this, because with these two pitching staffs, I think these are going to be tight, relatively low scoring games, and you're going to have those moments where one critical moment could be the deciding piece. And I know we all hope that it's a positive moment and not a mistake. But after watching Coastal, I mean, I wouldn't, if you're waiting on them to make a mistake, I would come up with a plan B. You're going to have to force them to.
Yeah, totally agree there. That is kind of the superpower that we've seen from them is just their ability to. Dan McDonnell in post game yesterday called it professional. Like
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they just show up and make the plays, and they don't really do a whole lot of extracurricular stuff.
Mhm.
They just kind of go about their business. Real quick, we will continue to talk about the potential championship, or not even the potential, the actual
Mhm.
championship matchup we have. But real quick, I have to put another word here for one of our other sponsors, Tecovas Boots. Whether it's the leather in your glove or your tailgating chairs, baseball people know that quality matters. That's why we love Tecovas Boots. Born in Texas, handcrafted with over 200 meticulous steps and comfortable from day one, they're perfect for wherever the college baseball season takes you. From road trips to rivalry games, post-game celebrations, or just everyday wear, Tecovas Boots are made to go the distance. Find your perfect pair today at Tecovas. I think if nothing else, Mark, as just college baseball fans and observers, I
Mhm.
don't think we could have set this up any better. You've got the hottest team in college
Yeah,
baseball. I mean, the idea, I don't really care who you're playing to win 28 in a row, to not have one game where you just come out and lay an egg,
yeah.
um, is incredible. And every coach that has played Coastal here in Omaha has remarked on that. Just like this game is really hard, and to win 28 in a row or whatever it is, like or 26 in a row, could be 28 if they win the next two. is just incredible stuff. And then you add on top of it that their strength all year, among many, but their biggest strength is their starting rotation, and their starting rotation, just like LSU's, is laid out.
Yep.
And they're going to be able to go with Flukie and Morrison, and so we're going to have just two absolutely incredible. I mean, four guys who could be big leaguers. Anderson is like going to be
Yeah.
a big leaguer,
Yeah.
and the others have a real shot. So that we're fortunate there, and I think we're even fortunate that if this goes to a game three, there are similar concerns for both sides. So it is
Yeah.
going to be like one of those just free for all, anything goes, excuse me, all hands on deck kind of games if
Yeah.
it comes to a game three. And so, um, I, my initial thought, to me, one of the big differences here, at the risk of oversimplifying, is just one team has two of the best five starting pitchers in college baseball and the other doesn't. Now, the other might have two of the best 15
Yeah.
starting
Right.
pitchers in college baseball, but Anderson and Ianson are just a cut above. And I can't, when I think about this matchup, I can't get past the fact that Coastal's going to have to beat one of those two guys. And are they capable? Yes. Would I bet on it? No. And that's kind of where the conversation starts and ends for me. That LSU's not going to waltz through this thing, but I think that's an advantage. And then I think there's a slight advantage in the lineup for LSU. Similar lineups in terms of, unless you want to say that person is Jared Jones for LSU, and I would listen. But generally speaking, this is not a couple of lineups that are built around one centerpiece that you have to
Yeah.
like hope the lineup comes back around to them. These lineups are not that, and so I think that's interesting. But again, I would give a little bit of an edge to LSU there, and maybe the bullpen edge goes to Coastal, but is that enough to overcome the other stuff?
Yeah.
And I think I would lean no. But man, I just think from a sheer entertainment standpoint, this is probably as good a matchup as we could have hoped for here.
Yeah. I don't dispute that at all. I think if Coastal is going to win, the path for them is they've got to drive up pitch counts on those LSU starters and make hay against the bullpen. And if it's Case and Evans, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
But but I do feel like that's the path. Um, that or for a rain shower to knock a starter out early, something like that, right? Because we did see that earlier. I understand the weather is going to be really hot, though. Now, what about the wind? Do you know which direction it's going to be blowing? Because it seemed last night it seemed to be going out a little bit.
Yeah, the first whatever 4 days of this
Mhm.
tournament, it was blowing in, and it was you couldn't get a ball out of here with a rocket launcher. The last 2 days, though, yeah, it was blowing out a little more. That the stadium played a little bit smaller. I've not really looked ahead too much, but it definitely will be hot. I can guarantee you that much. But I don't know. It feels like players who play their games in Baton Rouge and Myrtle Beach probably won't have an issue
Yeah,
with hot.
no, yeah.
But yeah,
I do think that's going to be fascinating. And LSU's not a team that runs a lot, and with with Bodine behind the plate for Coastal, he's a guy that really can negate that just because he's just so accurate. Um, I do feel like he's in my opinion, he's the focal point for Coastal, and he's hitting lead off as a catcher, which is always kind of cool, kind of
no,
different. Um, what it's been a good lineup through the year, not a ton of thump, but it's been good enough, obviously, to go on this magical run here. Now, if if they need to have a shootout, can they hang? That would be a question. Although I don't, depending on what the wind does, but I really don't expect that. I think it's going to be like a 5-4, 5-3 kind of game. All throughout. I don't think it's going to be a shootout at all.
I'm with you. I think a key here to watch is Coastal. A truly staggering stat. Coastal has been hit by a pitch 176
Hmm.
times this season. Think about that, 176 times. That, I mean, I'm not the best at math, but let's just say they played 60 games. I know they played maybe a little more than that, but uh, that's like two a game and then some. So that's just, and
Yeah,
at some point we just have to acknowledge that there's something about they're right up on the plate. And, part of it is they work counts, and part of it
Yeah.
is they're willing to let you make mistakes. But at this point, that's not an accident that a team gets hit by a pitch that much.
There's a reason they don't do that in the big leagues, and it's velocity. And what does LSU bring?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's you, I'm sure they're gonna still crowd the plate and they're gonna still wear their armor and they're gonna still take their shots. But I mean, if it gets meat, I mean, it's gonna hurt because everybody LSU brings in there's not a lot of soft tossing lefties, right? It's premium velo, so it's just something to think about. You definitely gonna have to bring your courage if you're gonna hang in there against 98.
That's a good point. Like, yeah, they're gonna have to earn it if they're if they're going to get hit by pitches in this series. I think that the thing with their offense, I think that, because you're right, there's not a ton of thump here. That a couple guys that can run the ball out of the
Yeah,
ballpark, including one in Colby Thorndike, who got hot late, and so he doesn't have the power numbers you would think, but like he's obviously a guy capable of that. But the thing that makes their offense work, though, because they still score plenty of runs, is yes, they take the free bases, but also, if they get a guy on first to lead off an inning, like that, very rarely is that guy left standing there when the inning is over. Now, maybe they don't score, but he's probably going to be on second or third base at some point, whether it's a bunt or a stolen base. They do run a decent bit. That's going to be something that LSU is going to have to contend with. Um, so they are going to try to make some things happen and see if they can force you into making mistakes, and we'll see if that'll either work or it won't. But I doubt Coastal's going to change who they are as a team going
yeah,
into the championship series.
yeah. I mean, they won 26 in a row. Why change
Right.
anything?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Mark, as we wrap up, any final thoughts, any lean you have on this series? Like I said, I think I lean LSU just because I think
Yeah.
there's just slight advantages in the rotation, slight advantages in the lineup. But at this point, I think that there can't possibly be any LSU fans out there thinking, oh, it's a Sun Belt team. We should be able to just waltz in there and play B+ baseball and expect to win. I can't imagine there are any
Yeah.
people that still think that way. But if there are, let me tell you right now that it's not going to be that simple. This
Yeah. They
team,
hadn't been paying attention. Yeah.
right? The Coastal is going to try to claw your eyes out. So
Yeah.
like it's not going to be easy. But
Yeah.
anyway, final thoughts for you, Mark.
Yeah. I love the matchup. I mean, it is. You've got the blue blood, very best of the program, and then you've got the I guess they're a great program, but they're not from a power conference, so there's that chip, right? And this is the opportunity to kind of even things up, and be taken quote seriously and get your cred. So I love that storyline, and I do love that Coastal. They've just done everything they needed to do to continue to win games, and now they're going to face the most challenging opponent that they've seen, and on the grandest stage. And LSU gets a chance to win, I guess it'd be 2 in 3 years,
Yeah. Yep.
and that's rarefied air there. You don't really get that opportunity. You don't have good enough teams to do that, and get enough breaks because as we've seen, often the best team doesn't have the final dog pile, and I think LSU or Coastal, whoever wins this, they could actually say, hey, we are the best team, and we weren't just the hottest team. And I feel like Coastal's got enough credibility built up over this last 2 months of not losing that they can truly claim it. I mean, it's not just a good team that got hot. They're one of the best teams in the country and with a chance to be the very best. And if you're LSU, you didn't win the SEC, you didn't win the SEC tournament, but the focus was always on the big prize at the end and of having success in Omaha, and this is your opportunity. You've made it all the way to the finals. You've got your pitching set up. It's right there for the taking. Um, all you got to do is just beat this team that doesn't lose.
Yeah, it's
So,
just that simple. Yeah, it's a good reminder that the words simple and easy are not
yeah,
synonyms,
yeah,
um, because it's straightforward, but buddy, it's not going to be that easy. And it's such a good point you make there at the end that you know LSU didn't win the previous two trophies that were available to them, but this coaching staff they care about that stuff. That's not what I'm suggesting, but they always have one eye on this trophy
Hmm.
all season long, and they're always every move they make is with an eye towards how does this set us up better to win the national title. Whether it's hey, this guy like Cooper Williams, right? Like a guy who hadn't
Hmm.
pitched much, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, I think he can help us now. Maybe he couldn't help us as much in February or March, but I think he can help us now. And so they go to him, right?
Hmm.
We've seen John Pearson a couple times
Yeah.
in Omaha, and it's like a guy who really wasn't in the mix at various times, but they think he can help them now. And so that kind of stuff is just further evidence that like these coaches for LSU are always looking at the bigger picture there, um, with an eye towards winning a national title. And here they are in a position to try to win another. That series will start Saturday evening. It'll be Saturday evening, then Sunday afternoon, and then Monday evening if
Hmm.
necessary for game 3 there. So, which I like that format. You know, it used to be 3 night games, and I think it used to start on Monday.
Hmm.
And so I like this format where it gives you the day game and allows college baseball to kind of be in a little more of a prominent position with the Sunday afternoon game when folks are coming home
Yeah.
from church or from being outside or whatever it is, and being able to watch college baseball on big ESPN. So that'll be an awesome showcase for the sport. Should be an awesome series. Mark and I will be covering it extensively. I'm sure we'll have plenty of content, both of us, over the next few days, regardless of how it goes. In addition, of course, Kendall and Aaron are out here. They'll have content as well. Aaron wrote a wonderful piece last night after LSU's win
Yeah.
over Arkansas that he worked on until the wee hours of the morning. So make that worth his while. Go read that
Yeah.
if you haven't done so already. Um, but otherwise, that is going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. Thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors. Thank you to Tecovas Boots. Thank you to Mark, as always, for joining me. And thank you to listeners for listening. We will talk to you, I don't know, about this time next week. By then, we'll have a national champion, and we'll break it all down for you then on Highway to Hoover. We'll